Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first session of the day. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first panel, How Pharma and Commercial Leaders Are Investing in Healthcare's Future. I'm going to hand you over to the moderator for the session. Lala, over to you.
Good morning, all. We have three brilliant expert panelists from the corporate venture world who will be sharing their perspectives on sourcing and harnessing healthcare innovation with a specific focus on digital health. Please, could I ask the panel to introduce yourselves briefly to our audience, and we'll work alphabetically, so starting with Lara.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Lala. Happy to be here. My name is Lara Kool. I'm a founder and partner of Philips Ventures, which is the corporate venture arm of Royal Philips, based out of Amsterdam. And within our team, I run the European investment activities, which also includes a digital health focused venture fund. So far, we've made 10 investments in very interesting, innovative digital health partners for Philips across Europe and the US. We typically look at early commercial stage digital health companies that hopefully become future partners of Philips to accelerate innovation for our customers. So happy to be here, looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Great. So thanks, Lala, for the intro, and Lara and Bruce, great to be here with you, and thanks for the audience who tuned in. So I'm Rana London. I work at Novartis. I'm in the investment arm, the strategic actually investment arm. As everyone knows, we have a Novartis Venture Fund. So this is really our corporate venture, independent from the business, somehow focused on biopharma and on great science and financial return. So I sit in the strategic venture just to help the audience separate the difference here. And this is a fund that is evergreen, created to enable Novartis to invest in innovation, biopharma, and also health tech, where there is a direct synergy with the business. So we invest in companies that have a strategic fit to Novartis. And our aim really is how can we bring medication to patients that have a better outcome, that are more affordable, and they are more accessible. So our investment in summary really goes across the full value chain of pharma, across discovery, R&D, commercialization, medical affairs, and manufacturing. I think this health tech, I'm actually focused on health tech investment. We have around 18 companies in our portfolio across really the full value chain that I've just mentioned. We normally go in Series A, Series B, and we follow our companies till the end. Really, we don't have a typical ticket size, usually between 3 to 5. But we can do less and we can do more. What really matters is what makes sense for the investment. I'm based out of Basel, and I have a colleague that is based in the West Coast, and another colleague in Boston. So Bruce, over to you.
Thanks, Rana. So I'm Bruce Meadows. I'm managing partner of Takeda Digital Ventures. We're a corporate venture arm of Takeda that just invests in health tech, digital technology, with a focus closer to the patient. So we're looking for companies that can both be strategically relevant to Takeda to help our aim of the digital transformation of our business, but also invest in companies that offer superior investment returns, in that we want to be a profitable source of innovation for Takeda. We're investing a little bit later stage. We want to invest in companies that have at least got a proof of concept that can be relevant for Takeda so that we can start those commercial collaborations as soon as possible. And we're also a little bit younger in that we started our investment activities just last year. And so last year was a difficult year for everybody, but we managed to get 4 investments done, looking at everything from data to virtual first treatments, and a number of really interesting things. So essentially, we're focused on the value chain of pharma close to the patient. And it's a pleasure to be here on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think we'll start off on a very sort of overarching basis. Obviously, you know, the healthcare industry has always been driven by innovation, but it's feeling like the rate and pace of change is a lot greater than it has been. The mega trends, they've always been there. They're continuing to drive demand, but we're seeing more challenges, I suppose, in fulfilling that demand with the cash constraints on healthcare spending, both at the public and private levels. So in in that sort of background, are we really able to find true innovations, the sort of innovation that will change practices and outcomes, and also have those innovations adopted? I think we'll go back the other way. Bruce, starting with you.
Well, I mean, great question, and the answer is absolutely. Combining technology with healthcare is probably the best use of technology. We can find new ways of identifying patients, new ways of treating them. We can combine digital therapeutics with the traditional biopharmaceutical treatments that we have, and we can really focus in on measuring and seeing the outcomes of the patients. And using technologies, we can just improve patients' lives, and we know that we're improving them because we can measure it and see that. We can put the right treatment to the right patient at the right time if we understand more about that patient. So we can combine genetic databases with phenotypic databases and behavioral databases, and really better refine which patients we're able to treat. So I'm very excited, but we're not the only people. Takeda's not the only person. Rana, you're doing some great things there.
Yes, no, I think you covered all the important points here, Bruce. I think to your question, Lala, in terms of given the constraints at the moment, whether it is the perfect time, actually it is the perfect time. I'd say maybe it's the perfect storm at the moment, because when I joined Novartis maybe around 4 years ago, and I come from the life sciences industry, so I was on the biotech side. And what came to me, and really what was the trigger for me to really focus on the health tech, I don't think today we have any shortage in terms of innovation on the drug side. We have some amazing molecules that are out there really going into really exciting areas of medicine. But despite all of this, we still see poor outcome in healthcare. We still see high prices. We still see problems in access where not everyone has access to medication. And this is where you think that the problem today is really not about not having good drugs out there on the market. The problem is about how are we delivering these drugs and how are we supporting the patients and the healthcare system in this. So I think technology comes really here to, I will not repeat what Bruce said, but exactly it, to really help with outcome and to really help with access and affordability. And I think it is really the perfect place where I'm sitting today with my colleagues and everyone in this space. So maybe Lara, you can chime in.
And then maybe to provide a little bit of the medtech perspective in the discussion as well. I think actually this goes both for us as medtech as well as pharma, that we also have a role to play to kind of make some of those innovations more structurally adopted within the clinical practice. As we see, it's sometimes for hospitals, for providers, it's difficult to themselves continue to innovate, especially in acute circumstances that we're currently in. So we are able to package those things right and show the health economics, but especially also the outcome improvements that will help in also creating actual structural adoption of more holistic, patient-oriented care solutions. And I think we have a role to play there. And that's also, I think, what all of our positions are essentially within our corporate groups, is to be a little bit of that bridge so we can create integrated solutions with innovative partners and help the adoption become more structural. And one element that we, for instance, do is we are creating more long-term contract relationships with providers, where you actually create kind of a performance-based relationship, and you have a longer period of time to try out new innovations and create implementations over time that you both benefit from. And that could help in some of the cost-constrained situations where you take a little bit of joint risk and thereby prove out that these implementations are actually going to help the system improve outcomes and save cost even at the same time.
Great,
Lara,
thank you.
I love that point, Lara, because we're looking at that as well. Almost, how can we share risk with the payers? How can we use data to ensure that we really are delivering the best outcomes that we can to the patients? And really, those long-term partnerships is critical. And again, building bridges. We're taking demands and requests from our business on how they can improve different things and focus on outcomes. And we're also seeing smaller companies, innovative companies with those solutions. And I think that's the role of the corporate VC, is to bridge those two those two parties.
Yes, Bruce, that's a fantastic point there. I mean, obviously, you're in a very interesting perspective where you can see what the issues are that are affecting the large multinationals that you're part of, but also the smaller, more entrepreneurial companies that are looking to get a foothold. I think it'd be quite interesting for the audience to sort of touch upon the role of the corporate investor at Takeda, Philips, and Novartis, and how do you really think about investing in and developing companies? What are the drivers of your decisions, and how do you typically structure these sorts of relationships?
So maybe Lala, I can maybe start from our side. I think being in a corporate venture, this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is about the strategic fit. So really the start is, as much as I look externally for innovation, we play a really important role in terms of how do we really understand our business and come very close to our stakeholders, because these are ultimately the people who are going to champion the innovation that we are really investing in. So it starts always with understanding our business across our various divisions, and to really help the business strategically to think about how technology might help address specific needs. And then bridging this with the external innovation. So how do we really start? First of all, and most importantly, is to really understand what the company is trying to read, what problem they are trying to solve. This is really critical. And if this problem is really in a good fit with what we are trying to solve internally. And this is not for a selfish reason, but this is really about an investment that can create value, as I mentioned, to us internally. But we also want to be able to be in a position where we are able to help the company create value for them. So the strategic fit and the synergy is number one kind of a criteria for us to look through. Once this is really checked, then we look for the team. The team is super important, and the flexibility of the team during the due diligence process and the conversation. Because what happens is during diligence, we really become almost like one team internally and externally, trying to really brainstorm together how we can use this technology in our business. Scale is also important, and not only just the scale as such, but how does this innovation really fits in the workflow of everything else in the context of the clinical settings, or in the clinical trial, or in the commercial setting? How does it fit with the healthcare system in general? How does it interact with the regulators? So it's not really about looking at this technology as a silo, but how does it really fit within the ecosystem, and whether this is really very much centered about the patient and the healthcare system. So these are, if I want to pick these three things, this is what I would go for, and everything else becomes typical diligence. Maybe just I will add, in terms of your question, how do we help these companies? We take observer board on the company, but these are observers, so we really try to stay away from control. But then we connect the company very, very closely to our clinical team, our development head. So really, it's the help and the synergy there is really quite spectacular on both sides.
Thanks, Rana. Maybe to build on that a little bit, and I recognize many of the approaches and points you mentioned as we look at things as well. I think how we sometimes position ourselves also to the internal organization is that we work with innovative companies and the market to kind of identify the future needs of our customers, where most of our commercial organization is typically working what the current needs of our customers are, right? And what products to put in place for those current needs. And what we try to find is those partners that can help us address what are the needs in the next few years, and maybe already bring those forward today by connecting the dots. And an example would be, we, for instance, have a lot of ways to gather data about patients, increasing number of ways, through sensors, through our patient monitors, through diagnostic scans. However, sometimes it's difficult to combine all that data and make it actionable in new types of ways. And Bruce alluded to all the different data points we can gather as well. But then we try to find partners that invent new ways to actually use all that data to provide actionable content for a physician to base decisions on it in clinical practice. And in the end, that's what you really need. You want to expand the amounts of data and amounts of devices and everything you use, but then make it small again, so we actually understand what to do with it. And And there we try to help our organization connecting the dots of all of our medtech devices we have internally, the own connectivity layers we are building, and connecting that with external partners. From an investor perspective, everything we do out of our fund is partnership oriented. So if there's already a intent to bring a company in, we would make the investment not out of our fund, but out of one of our businesses where the close link already is. When we do it out of our fund, our thesis is essentially we do an investment, we use that investment to build a relationship with this company, and then explore the many touch points we think exist within our corporate organization, our commercial organization, and hope then in 12 to 18 months to create actual commercial contracts where we can help deploy their solution into the clinical space, into our consumer-oriented businesses, or other constituents in healthcare that we work with. That's typically our approach to bring in partners.
But I mean, a lot of really good things have been covered. There's a couple of things I just wanted to touch on and reinforce. When it comes to the real advantage of working with a CVC in health tech is that there are many, just like our colleagues, we have a group that focuses on doing investments, and the investment can be seen as a relationship initiation step. It can also be seen as a Kickstarter for the company to really develop their pilot or to do some initial scale up. But we also have another group that supports our venture activities, which is a dedicated commercial digital group, which essentially will aid us. They're involved in our diligence. They meet with the company as we are deciding if we do the investment or not. And then there's immediate handover. Handover is not the right word, but immediate cooperation with people in our organization who can open and create those commercial relationships. So that's really important. Rana, you were talking about strategic fit, and I think I like to think about strategic fit from 2 points of view. There's a hard strategic fit, which is what does the business need right now, and is there a technology company that can help solve that need? And so it's matchmaking, but it's also a little bit more soft in that we have to think about where could healthcare go in the next couple of years, and really that's what venture investment is about. It's looking at a horizon that's a little bit longer than this year's current budget cycle. But and part of that soft strategic fit is we like to organize fireside chats, virtual fireside chats between Takeda's senior leadership and the CEOs of our portfolio companies. And essentially, I don't even join this meeting. It's the top level folks just talking, sharing ideas, sharing visions about what could happen in healthcare, so that essentially Takeda is able to get a source of innovation directly from these entrepreneurial startup leaders, which is really helpful and probably one of the things that our CEO enjoys most about our venture activities.
Yeah, no, Bruce, I'm really glad you mentioned the different horizons, because we think in a very similar way. There is companies where they are already kind of a quick plug to what we are doing, and you can actually see the impact, or maybe already have a relationship with the business where investment comes after and makes sense. And there are others where there is a strategic fit somehow, but it's not necessarily just immediately now. And then the investment helps with this kind of building the relationship, with having access to competitive insights, but also helping shape until it is ready to go to the business. Now, if it becomes very, very far away, then this is really becomes more of a financially driven investment, where it probably will be very, very difficult to maybe even justify, because then we cannot add value to the company anymore. And our aim to really is to add value to the company and to the ecosystem as a whole. So.
Perfect. Well, this is a great opportunity for me to interject with the first question that we've got from our audience, which is, do you invest in good innovation or technology, or do you invest in management?
Well, it's not an either-or question. It's an and question.
It is an and, but if it is an amazing technology but the team is really bad, I really have to think a lot before I do the investment. It has to be both, as Bruce said, but the team is really very, very important, because the innovation and the things that the way the company goes through is a roller coaster, up and down. You really need to be able to work with a flexible team who is able to pivot, who is able to respond, and I think it's super important. But of course, both. But that's my feedback. So Lara, I don't know what is your.
Yeah, maybe a few thoughts. For sure, it's an and. I would agree, and also the type of relationship is also what's really attractive about being a minority investor, essentially, and leaving the company outside of the corporate as a standalone entity, creating its own success. Is what makes the model so attractive, and therefore the management is truly essential to have the execution ability, the vision, and the grit that it requires to get digital health adopted. In my experience, is extremely important, because in the end, we're not going to sit on the management seat. We're not going to take you by the hand and take you through our commercial channels. It's exactly the flexibility and the decision power of the management that decides the success of the company. So yeah, it's surely truly both very important.
Yeah, a great idea is nothing without a great management team. You know, we are truly long-term investors, so we want to have that partnership with founders and management and entrepreneurs who we know, trust, and can back to really create success.
Wonderful. So I think we've covered quite a lot on the sourcing side of things, but moving on to development, as Lara had mentioned before, it's not all about just developing the underlying technology, but it's also the business models for the successful deployment into clinical practice. So I suppose there's two questions here. One is from me and one is again from our audience. The first from me is, if we're looking at classic pharma or medtech players, how has digital health changed the product development model? And coming from our audience, we've got a question about, at our company, we're facing issues with investors in digital wanting to see market traction, whereas medical investors would like to see evidence before investing. How would you marry the two perspectives?
Well, there's two very deep questions that I'm not sure that they're perfectly aligned, but let's have a crack. So at the last one, it's a classic "it depends" answer, I think. So in many cases, it depends on what you're trying to do with your company and what are the proof of concept data points that you need to collect along the way. Now, if it seems like you probably need to show some sort of clinical traction and some sort of outcome and benefit for the patient before you'll actually get some market success, because those two things go together. I'm not sure how you can get market traction unless you've shown that you can have a benefit for your end user group, which in digital health is the patient. So I'll just leave it that one there. Any thoughts, Lara or Rana?
Maybe one short to build on that, Bruce, is I think I fully agree with you. It also depends a little bit on the type of value proposition, because digital health is obviously quite a broad space, and not everything being medically regulated. And we see many solutions that do optimize care delivery, for instance, in ways that doesn't require clinical validation, but requires commercial traction to actually gather the data points, typically to get somebody to pay for it, essentially, which is in healthcare obviously always a big challenge. And if it is a clinically impactful solution, then yes, the medical evidence does become important. And I think medtech and digital investors will find each other there.
Yes, I think very similar from our side as well on the second question, Lala. I think it's not that we must see market traction, but the company doesn't have to come with a collection of clients already paying for their solution, but at least some indication that there is already market traction there, even with depending if the company is so important for us and we think we can help. Even if they have one client, at least with a little bit of maybe a pilot, depending on if other stars align at the same time. So if the team is great, if the strategic fit is high, if the partnerships that they have are attractive, even if they come along with some indication of a market traction, this does not mean that the investment is going to be turned down. I think it's the proposal of the company at the time, and where, as Lara said, where is it sitting? Is it in clinical or is it in commercial? So I wouldn't say, for the person who asked this question, I wouldn't say, please don't be discouraged from coming and talking to investor. It's the full story that matters, and it's not only this particular point here.
Rana, it does bring up an interesting thought. What I've observed in a lot of digital health companies is that they are sometimes forced to almost build an end-to-end solution to be able to actually prove out their market traction, while their actual value proposition may only be a small part of that, right? So they provide they build the provider interface, they build the patient app, they build the chat functionality,
So
while
true.
their core may be some type of data collection and interpretation. So I do think it sometimes poses challenges, and I've found myself also making 1,000 introductions in between digital health companies to say, if you would just link in together, it may avoid you having to build the whole value proposition yourself, just because you need to get some market traction. So it's a difficult balance there.
Yeah, we've done the same thing as what you're talking about, Lara. We have a virtual care company called Oshi Health, which is doing virtual first treatment for patients with serious GI disorders. And rather than build an entire virtual care company from scratch, essentially we went out and we understood what the value chain is, the different modules of technology and services that we needed to put together. And we've put together essentially a virtual company. We've kept in-house the core treatment and pathways so that we understand and manage those patients very, very carefully. But lots of this different technology we didn't build, we didn't invest. We are essentially renting and buying in.
Yep.
It's interesting to hear that there's quite a number of different business models that can support your investments and, facilitate the path through development and also the path through market. Are you able to give a little bit more information on how, in general, or you specifically, that corporate venture partners can help support companies in these endeavors?
Well, I think if I can start on that one, first of all, validation. Validation can be very important for early stage technology companies. Partnering with a pharma or a medtech group gives you validation, because you can say, well, here's a customer, which is Takeda Pharmaceuticals, or here's a customer, which is Novartis. And that will help you when you're going out into the market, give credibility to your product and service, because we will only partner with you if you've passed our rigorous diligence process, and we think there's value to doing that. Beyond that, there was just last night, I was on a call with one of our portfolio companies that actually Novartis is a co-investor in as well. And we were doing a group meeting to discuss the product development pathway for this company and what they could do to meet the needs of pharmaceutical companies in general. So we get together and we talk and we collaborate on ways that your little company and your startup company can actually improve the product. So it's not just validation, it's ideation, it's really working through the issues and giving you connections and insight into our business that you may not get if you're not a partner with us. As Lara, I think you said, the investment is often opening the door to a greater relationship, and that's what we can bring.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Bruce. And similar to the model you referred to earlier, we are not a very old outfit either at Philips, a little bit longer than you are, but our team only exists for 5 years. And last year we merged with another team within our company that works on startup engagement and relationship building, essentially on the commercial side with our corporate organization. So we have a group within our team that's essentially the startup champion, that really understand the roadmaps and the expertise and the different teams within Philips and know when to link who to the startup company. So it's really their navigation tool throughout our big global company, and find the right places where we can bring in expertise, we can bring in information, which is also really different for each and every portfolio company. One may need indeed a channel to market and could use our install base in radiology, for instance. Another would like an integration with some of our data collection capabilities, because they provide an AI-driven interpretation tool for physicians to optimize care pathways. So we look at what are the needs for this company in the stage they are, and we try to find within our organization, with dedicated champions, we try to find the right expertise and input to bring back to them. And I think that's a unique relationship really for a company to have.
Yeah, maybe Lara also, just maybe to add to what Lara and Bruce said, Also, where corporate venture can help here, I think also it can help on the ecosystem level.
True.
So
Yeah.
I give an example where, let's say, we can see sometimes companies where we say, okay, if we are the only investors here, this company has a technology that unless it becomes more of a kind of widely used in the industry, it actually becomes very difficult for this company to be able to commercialize. Then as a corporate venture, because also you are separated a little bit from your parent company, but you are close at the same time, then you can really I would call Bruce and I say, look, would Takeda be really interested to test this out? I would call Philips or Merck or all of these kind of a consortia of pharma who are also ventures in corporate venture. And then it's really, you create almost this kind of a momentum and adoption across many different pharma, because if it is used across many different kind of a pharma within the industry, this is when you can really start to create almost like the validation for this company. So
that's
this
really
is
great
one role
point.
also the venture. Yeah.
Really great point, Rana. Maybe one additional point to that on the partnerships is also that we are starting to see a lot of cross connections actually within our portfolio. So we have our 10 companies within our portfolio, all in digital health, a lot of them in kind of enterprise software as a service models to providers. And you now see some of them actually working together at some provider customers where they interlink their own solutions, and they're even faster than us as Philips interlinking them. So we also trying to build those relationships as well. To my earlier point that you don't want to have to build end to end, but just use the nice modules as Bruce nicely called them. I think that's also an interesting component. Also, we have 12 fund-to-fund positions at Philips. So we also have an indirect reach to another 150 medtech companies globally. So a lot of information and ecosystem to build from, for sure. Yeah.
And there's one last thing I'd like to add on to that, and that's geographic reach. You know, all of our companies here, we're global companies, and we're rarely looking for a solution that just meets one particular country's needs. So, you know, we can help you get out of your local market and all across Europe, or, you know, across the Atlantic and worldwide.
It sounds like there's some phenomenal provision of both sort of financial and intellectual capital through corporate venturing. We've got a very specific question here about due diligence, which you touched on earlier, Bruce. What is your average time to complete an investment partnership from initial conversation through to agreement signed? And there's also a request from a range in terms of shortest time to longest time as well.
Right. Well, typically this process takes about 3 months from initial contact. So initial contact, you might reach out to us and say, we've got a great idea. Can we pitch it? We listen to the pitch. We gradually increase the scrutiny and the level of diligence until we get to the point where we do the investment. In my experience, the part that takes the longest in this whole process is actually the documentation. If we can have a relatively quick negotiation, if there's no contentious issues, then the documentation goes quickly. Otherwise, it can be a little bit drawn out. From our fund's perspective, the fastest we've ever done a deal is 2 weeks. That was an exceptional case. That was super intense. I didn't get very much sleep. My team didn't get very much sleep. So I don't really want to repeat that, but it's possible. And we have taken 3 months as well.
Well, Bruce, I'm curious to know what was the driver that enabled that 2 weeks acceleration?
So in this case, first of all, there was a previous relationship. So we had seen that company pitch a couple of times before. When I say we, myself through various funds that I had been a part of in my past life, I'd seen the CEO, I knew the story. And in this particular case, there was a round closing soon. Essentially everything that I'd want the company to achieve in the last couple of pitches had been achieved, and now it was significantly de-risked. And then there was an external factor, and that external factor was the end of our financial year. And if we didn't make the investment before the end of financial year, our money would be gone and we couldn't do the investment. So we pushed.
Yeah. Maybe it's similar to us. I think knowing the company before is really important. It helps with acceleration. I would say probably 3 months, could be from 3 months to 6 months. It could be more, it could be less. I think maybe what makes impact on the timing, I would say, is working out the strategic fit. What is it that we are trying to do with the company? So there is a lot of conversation initially with the business and with the company, and really trying to come up with a business case, because for us, it's really about value creation for both sides. So if we get that right, I think everything else is just process. So this is really for us. And for me, when we get some companies and I say, so when are you planning to close? And they say maybe by the end of this month or maybe next month. It is going to be maybe a bit tough. It could be accelerated if the strategic fit is super high. You have now the champion of the business saying, yes, I want to go for it. Then we can achieve it. But I think definitely it would be very, very highly appreciated if companies approach us really not so close to their closing time. But there are creative ways. Sometimes if we think that Novartis as a strategic investor makes sense for the syndicate and we can really help the company, even if the closing date happens. We had many occasions where the company and the syndicate left the door open for whatever period of time, 60 days, 90 days, until we get our kind of process in place and we make the impact.
I think we are probably a little bit in between you both. So I would also agree that from our perspective, and the strategic fit takes the longest, essentially. We don't need to have a specific business case with a specific business. However, what we want to validate from our investments is that we find as many potential touch points internally as possible, because the more chances that you find also commercial relationships. So we do have quite a few conversations with our businesses to understand, would this potentially fit your innovation roadmap? What would you envision what a potential partnership could look like, kind of at that high level? To understand if there is a outlook towards those relationships, because that's in the end why also we'd like to have these partners in our portfolio. So that would typically take the longest, and indeed the rest is process, as Rana also said it. So we have done deals in 3 months as well, especially if we've known the company beforehand, because then you already have the trusted relationship essentially, and then just execution. We have our internal organizations educated and lined up now to make sure that we match institutional investor timelines there.
And one last thing, Lara, on that relationship, I would encourage the person who asked the question and everybody else to just reach out to us, even if you're not raising finance. If you think you will raise finance in the next year or so, reach out to us. Let's start getting to know each other. I'd be very happy to introduce you to the relevant people in our business so you can get to know them too. And this will be in both of our interests.
Yeah,
we
that's support you on that.
Great. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
and that's something
we all agree.
That's something that absolutely I would encourage any potential small companies looking for investment to do as well. Moving on to COVID, we'd sort of be remiss not to touch upon that. Obviously, the positive side of the pandemic is that it's been the catalyst for numerous developments across the healthcare industry. We have a question here about, do you think the strides in health tech innovation over the last few months have made the health tech industry more appealing to investors? Do you think this innovation growth and investment appeal will continue? And what should companies, large and small, be doing to best capitalize on these developments?
If I may start on this one, I think there's a lot of data out there that shows that technology and healthcare are here to stay for the long term. Last night I was looking at a review that looked at telemedicine utilization before COVID, which was very low single-digit %. At the peak of the first lockdown, it reached about 40 and 50% in the US, and now we've got a new baseline of 20%. So there was a wave there was a peak, but the baseline is much higher than it was. And I think that whilst this has been a tremendously tragic exercise for many people across the world, it really has shown that technology can actively have a positive impact on patients' lives. Of course, investment dollars have followed that. I think I'm seeing a lot, if not all of the new investment opportunities coming across my desk are always talking about the relevance to COVID. And I would encourage you to not really get stuck on that point. Tell us what are you doing for your particular niche. Not every single technology company can be directly applied to this COVID crisis. What are you doing? And certainly you've got a much higher visibility. There's a much greater pool of investment money available now, but really stick to what your focus is and tell us how you can transform that particular part.
I think it's a great point, Bruce. And I also want to call back to a conversation we actually had just before we were zoomed into this panel, where we refer to the change of pace. We're not so much travel and working from home and digitally, and actually realizing that a lot of the things we used to do live are also possible in a digital format. And I think that analogy you can also take to healthcare, where this has been or is still a very strong digital health experiment in terms of adoption, because now suddenly physicians are starting to realize, I was pushing back on adoption, I was pushing back, now I had to, and hey, wait a minute, it actually works. We can work at least partly from home, and it won't be 100% like it was, but we can use this digital technology, we can monitor patients at a distance, they don't need to come in for every conversation. And I think that is a structural change. And in the conversations I have with institutional investors, medtech investors, health tech investors, the topic usually is which part of this will remain structural and which part of this will revert back to what we did before. And I think that's the question. The verdict is still out. I think we all here have a role to play there to ensure things become structural and adoption remains and increases. But that's what I think was an important part of this pandemic, which hopefully is a positive outcome essentially for patients in the end.
Yes, I think Lala, I think Bruce and Lara covered almost everything. Maybe two things I would add from our side in terms of COVID and post-COVID. I think there would be more attention, to companies that we potentially did not, at least from Novartis perspective, that we probably did not pay attention to before in terms of investment, but this is really triggered with when COVID happens, almost we had to act super quickly, and digital was adopted very, very fast. But then there was the infrastructure that actually supports all of this was more kind of done very quickly as a collage. Let's see how it works. But now going forward, technologies in healthcare are going to stay. But the future is really about how us as an investor, we can really play, and companies, how can we really play a role in building that infrastructure that enables these digital technologies to plug in, not only in a siloed ways, but more on an ecosystem level in the healthcare system. So we are now, I've been looking at companies that maybe solve problems that are more logistical, things I haven't looked at before, things that help with the billings, things that help with super administrative, but they are so important because they are kind of like a roadblock in the whole journey of getting this delivery of care done. So we will see potentially more companies solving these problems, and as investors, I think we really need to pay attention to them because sometimes things don't get to the finish line or are not optimized because of these administrative things. The second thing I wanted to mention with the COVID is really just, I think everybody started to think more about life and about why we are here on Earth, at least for me, and as an investor, about the impact that we are making. So I think post-COVID, I think every time looking at the companies that we are investing in, it's about the impact we're making on the world as a whole, on global health, but also on the negative impact that we are making. So we're thinking of the investment.
No, can I just say just one last?
I'm afraid, Bruce, I'm sorry, we're running out of time now, and Rana, I think, left it on a really, really nice point that, looking at the global impact of what innovation can create and the great strides in healthcare that we collectively as an industry have been making. So, it's been a really sort of stimulating and interesting conversation, and I'd like to thank you all for your time. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to deal with all the questions, but I'm sure that the audience may well be reaching out to you all,
yes,
giving you a kind invitation to do so. Thank you for your time, and thank you also to the audience for listening.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
Thank you. was a pleasure.
Lara,
Thank
Bruce,
you
thanks so much.
to
Pleasure.
everyone.
you,
Obviously, as has already been said, please do reach out to all of the panelists, whether that be over the platform or whether it be via LinkedIn or whatever it might be. I'm sure you'll all agree it's been an absolutely fantastic panel, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have you all here today. So thank you to Lala, Lara, Bruce, and Rana for a great opening session. Our next session is drug discovery and development in the era of AI and analytics. So I look forward to seeing you then. But in the meantime, take a break, grab a cup of tea or coffee, and I'll see you back here again soon.